Jojo from MileSplit here with Becca Peter, who runs the super popular Twitter account Pole Vault Power. You talk about all things pole vault. Today we're going to talk about Mondo Duplantis, arguably the best pole vaulter of all time for high schoolers. Although you mentioned there's one guy who you think might be better?
Yeah, well, my opinion prior to Mondo was that the best high school vaulter of all time was Kerrigan. Casey was from Ording, Washington, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere. And he still has the state record in our state of 17.4 3/4, which he set in 1969. Casey's actually very similar to Mondo. He allegedly had a pole vault pit in his backyard. He had a bunch of brothers, and they grew up just doing all the sports. And allegedly, he jumped his age from age 8 until age 17, which is really similar to what Mondo's done, except Mondo's done better. And then in 1968, Casey jumped 17 feet, and he made the Olympic team as a junior in high school, which Mondo obviously didn't make the Olympic team last year as a sophomore, but he's already jumped higher this year than last year's Olympic standard. So if the Olympics were this year, Mondo would be going. Definitely a lot of similarities. The only difference, the biggest difference is when Casey jumped, after he jumped 17.4 3/4, he went for 17.10 and some change, which was a world record at the time.
Oh, wow.
But the event was a little less mature then because fiberglass poles were still pretty new. So I don't think Mondo's going to be attempting the world record as a high schooler, but it's a little bit apples to oranges in that regard. But yeah, I mean, Mondo's the only vaulter who's really come close to Casey in terms of how good they are relative to the best in the world for all ages.
It's not an Olympic year, but it is a World Championships year, and he has that standard down.
It's nice for Mondo because he's competing for Sweden. He has dual citizenship, and that makes things a little easier for him because he doesn't have to worry about qualifying at USA's. Although I'm confident that even if he was American, I think he would still have a really good chance of making the team, even if he did have to qualify at USA's. The gap between what the best high schoolers do and the rest of the world has really grown, and so it's really unusual to see high school pole vaulters who are competitive at the elite level of the sport.
He's not alone, exactly. Emmanuel Corrales, they're about 2 weeks apart.
Yeah.
I think he's from Greece, right? Yeah. He just cleared 5.7 meters this weekend. And they were really competitive with each other at the youth championships in 2015. Who do you think would win if they were to go against each other right now?
It's hard to say. Yeah, I think they've gone back and forth a few times. They're both really exciting vaulters. I don't know as much about Corrales' history, but they're very similar in age, jumping very similar heights, and they seem like they have a pretty similar build too. Like they're both physically underdeveloped. You know, they haven't finished. They're only 17. They haven't finished growing yet. And guys, a lot of times they just keep getting faster and stronger, and sometimes until they're like 20. Since they're both so similar in age, and they both represent European countries, they've got all the European juniors and world juniors and like every possible meet internationally. They could be going head to head. So that's super exciting too.
I did notice on Corrales' Twitter account. He says that he's a professional pole vaulter. Mondo is not professional right now. What opportunities are there to go pro in pole vault? And do you think there's more opportunities competing as a European athlete compared to being an American athlete looking to go pro in pole vault?
As a European athlete, I think that as a Swedish athlete, that a lot of the clubs there also offer sponsorships to their athletes. So I think he might have opportunities in terms of clubs. And then obviously he would have opportunities in terms of shoe sponsors, which tends to be the main sponsorship opportunity for pole vaulters. Overall in the sport, it's really tough as an elite pole vaulter. There's not a lot of opportunities. But Mondo's super marketable right now. I don't know. It's hard to say if he'll go pro or not. That's up to him and his family. Summer would be a great time to do it if he was going to do it because there's a World Championships this summer. And the way that the contracts are set up, if you perform well at a meet like that, you get a lot of bonuses from your sponsor. Like there's prize money in the meet, and then you get bonuses from your sponsor. And a lot of times those bonuses will roll over to the next year. So if you jump well at the World Championships, not only do you get bonuses for jumping well there, but then you might make more money the next year as well. And if you look ahead to next summer after senior year, there's no World Championships. There's nothing
Right.
I mean, there's smaller meets, but there's not a big meet like that. And just in terms of his career, I mean, he's so marketable right now because of his age, because
Right.
it's so unusual to have someone so young that's so competitive with the big boys. And shoe sponsors love potential, and I mean, that's part of why they pick up some of these high school athletes, because they want to get them now, and they're kind of gambling on, who's going to make it big. So, if he were to wait just a couple years, I don't know that his value would necessarily be much higher unless he really, because the next level from here then would be getting into jumping 6 meters and maybe taking shots at the world record. And that's a big jump. I mean, I think he's got the potential to do that at some point, but gambling on am I going to do that in the next few years is kind of tough. So
if you were to make a prediction for what you think he's going to do this summer, what would you say?
It's kind of hard to say like height-wise, but I think he'll make the final at the World Championships. Like, I don't want to predict a medal because that starts getting pretty crazy, but he's jumping. It's just like crazy that he's jumped 570 or higher 3 meets in a row. Like, I was looking at the world list, and he has the 7th highest mark in the world this year. But of the guys that are ahead of him, only 3 vaulters have jumped 570 or higher 3 times indoors this season. Now, granted, it's a slow year indoors because there's no World Championships. So, and Renault's injured. Sam Kendricks hasn't started jumping yet. So, it's not quite as competitive as like last year when there's a World Championships.
Right.
But once you're jumping 570 consistently, that's when you really start really being an elite vaulter who can go and show up and perform at diamond meets. Your highest mark as a vaulter doesn't necessarily reflect what you're capable of doing on any given day, but the fact that his last 3 meets have been so high, I mean, it's in some ways it's a little easier to be consistent indoors because the conditions are consistent, but still, I mean, there's not a lot of guys in the world that can do that right now, so that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.